Happening now, millions of people on the East Coast are waking up affected by Superstorm Sandy. At least 16 people have died.
And nearly 7 million more don't have power right now. And unfortunately, this is just the beginning. Sandy is now moving inland. That's where President Obama has declared parts of New York a disaster area. Ines Ferre is in New York with the latest.
Hurricane Sandy flooded some parts of New York City, knocking off power to thousands of people this morning. Much of the southern part of Manhattan is in the dark. A storm surge nearly 14 feet high pushed ashore, flooding hundreds of miles of coastline from Virginia to Massachusetts.
It's the most flooding I've seen in all the years I've lived here.
Floodwater and high winds has knocked out power to millions of people.
We are seeing a large number of fires caused by down wires and electrical problems relating to outages.
More than 200 firefighters are still battling a blaze in an evacuation area in Queens. More than 50 homes have already been destroyed. The cause of this fire is still being investigated. And power outages prompted a mass evacuation from NYU's hospital when a backup generator failed. Dozens of ambulances lined up to evacuate more than 200 patients. Throughout the early morning hours, and extra help was called in to help move patients.
We have 50 firefighters coming here as well as from help from Greater New York Hospital Association. There's a lot of help, but it's a challenging situation.
Just about all of southern Manhattan is shut down. The floodwaters are receding, but Sandy's record surge proved to be too much for the island. This was a scene at the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel as the Hudson River overflowed its boundaries. Sandy came ashore just south of Atlantic City Monday night. The city's famous boardwalk took a beating. 80 sections were swept away. Once on land,
this is almost like from fall to immediate winter, like overnight.
Sandy combined with a cold front to produce a massive snowstorm in the Appalachians. The subway system in New York is dealing with what the Transit Authority is calling an unprecedented situation. Mayor Michael Bloomberg says New Yorkers will get through this together, as they always do. Live in New York, Ines Ferre, now back to you.
Thank you for the update, Ines. Now, Sandy isn't technically a hurricane anymore, but as Ines mentioned, it has collided with a winter storm and is now being called Superstorm Sandy as she makes her way into Pennsylvania and upstate New York.
And as the storm and damage and flooding wasn't enough, as you just saw, nearly 200 firefighters in Queens, New York are battling a massive fire right now. At least 50 homes have been destroyed. This fire is happening in an area that is flooded by Superstorm Sandy. No word on what started the fire. Only 2 people received minor injuries. Sandy even has closed down some major U.S. airports and has grounded flights from around the world. Some New Mexicans are stranded as a result.
And we got in touch with one man who's experiencing Sandy's wrath firsthand. News 13's David Romero is live in a Newsplex with more. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Matt. Sandy is unleashing its full fury, and many New Mexicans are in the middle of it all. That includes Paul Alexander. He owns Albuquerque's Party Trolley. He was in New York for a quick business trip, but now he's not sure when he can go home, or rather come home, thanks to Sandy and its torrential rain and wind.
I'd say the scariest thing is right now we're 25 stories up in our hotel room, and the scariest part isn't the rain, it's the wind, because you can kind of feel the building move at times.
Alexander is scheduled to come home today, but as you can imagine, that could change. I spoke to one woman who's been preparing for this storm for a week. You'll hear from her in our next half hour. Matt, back to you.
All right, thank you, David. Looking forward to that. And so far, thankfully, everyone we've talked with from New Mexico is safe out on the East Coast. Elizabeth.
PNM workers from across the state are on their way to the East Coast to help restore power to parts of Washington, D.C. and Maryland. Around 40 workers and 22 work trucks left Albuquerque yesterday afternoon. They should be arriving sometime on Thursday. Now, once they get there, they'll be contracted by other companies and sent to help make repairs based on where help is needed. Now, depending on the damage, crews there could be spending at least a month on the East Coast.
And make sure you stay with News 13 all day long and all week for continuing coverage of Superstorm Sandy, both on air and online. In fact, you can watch live coverage of the storm anytime at our website, krqe.com.
Police say 2 people are in custody for stabbing a homeless man at an Albuquerque park. 49-year-old Ronald Chavez and 37-year-old Kathleen Wiley were arrested. Cops say they stabbed the victim yesterday afternoon at Coronado Park. Police say the victim is a homeless man. He was taken to the hospital in serious condition. They tell us he is expected to survive.
Jury selection should continue today for the trial where a man is suing a funeral home all because of the BioCare scandal. Chuck Hines says Noblin Funeral Services should have known that BioCare was broke and not doing the medical research as it had promised. Chuck donated his father's remains to BioCare a few years before, only to find out his dad ended up at a medical waste incinerating company in Kansas City, along with the remains of 7 other people from here in New Mexico. Then when investigators raided BioCare's headquarters on Paseo del Norte, they say they found even more body parts, some in fridges, others left out into the open to decompose.
I had one client who thought he received his wife's ashes, and then after the police raided the BioCare facility, found out that his wife was completely intact and essentially rotting there at the office.
All right, besides the lawsuit against Noblin Funeral Services, other families are suing Riverside Funeral Home in Berlin, saying it should have known better to work with BioCare as well. BioCare and its owner are not facing any criminal charges. Later today, a former New Mexico probation and parole supervisor should find out how long he'll spend in federal prison for having child porn on his computer. Larry Franco pled guilty to child porn charges back in April. He says he downloaded the porn to know what to look for when he checked sex offenders' computers. The feds did not buy that, so Franco will spend at least 5 years in prison now.
We are exactly 1 week away from the general election, and while it's clear who the front runners are in the presidential and congressional races in New Mexico, the battle for control of the roundhouse is still up in the air. In the state Senate, Democrats have a 28-14 majority and should still be in control next year, but that's not the case in the House. Democrats only outnumber Republicans 36-33, with 1 independent caught in the middle. 6 House races are too close to call right now. 5 of the 6 are currently being held by Republicans. The GOP is trying to hold those seats and gain some in order to take back the House.
And interesting, talking about elections on a national level, FEMA and the Federal Election Assistance Commission are now trying to see what to do about the national elections out east on Tuesday, and to tell states to look at their laws to see, is it possible maybe to even move that date a little bit because of all the destruction from Sandy.
That's interesting. We're going to have to stay tuned, for that.